Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Hello, hello. Another week, another week of nothingness, I guess.
We are in a holding pattern that we've been in for a little bit now. With Blizzard telling us that the arena wild rotation is coming, but unsure exactly when. And yep, that patch is going to have a big BG update as well. So BG's kind of in a holding pattern as well, even though breaking up the demon meta has already given it a lot more life. I've been playing some BGs last week. I know you were playing some BGs. Like, I was winning with all sorts of comms. I was being beat by all sorts of comms. I was climbing. It felt good. Whenever I climb, I feel like the meta's good. Whenever I stop climbing, I feel like the meta's bad because I feel like I'm a good and skillful player, whether I am or not. I feel that way. And so when the meta is good, I should be climbing.
You're very representative of 99% of the population
I
then.
know, I'm a man of the people.
That's very true.
But yeah, it does, like, Battlegrounds, like, just we're gonna get into the arena with the deep fried meta in a bit, but Battlegrounds just feels really good to me right now, also because they did, and this change happened like a month ago, more than a month ago, but with the demons meta, it wasn't as apparent. But when they changed the animations, you now just have more time, like especially in the most critical turns. They've effectively extended the rope, and that's been so critical for me because I have like low APM. I'm not that familiar with things, including the meta. I have like think on turns a lot, and so just extending that little bit of time, like I'm getting like 10 to 15 extra seconds. I feel, if not more than that, in the mid game turns. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's true. Those changes were much needed, especially, one of the most frustrating things previously was poisonous things repeatedly hitting one once.
Yeah,
I think that was most people's complaints. That could easily eat up like an additional 10, 15 seconds. And that animation really took away from the experience. And I think they're doing a good job of trying to improve everyone's experience there with the UI. Obviously, one of the things that they still need to deal with is the recruit bug, because right now,
well, I mean, what does that really like do anything?
yeah, well, they want you to be in suspense. They want
Hmm.
you to not know,
It
right?
doesn't change the
And
outcome.
it doesn't change the outcome, but it changes the experience that people have.
Okay. If you want to know
So
what the recruit bug is, it's like if the word recruit shows up where the intern thing does, that means the game is over. You're out. So if you're not in like the final two, that means you lost. If you are in the final two, that means you either won or lost.
yeah, and the recruit bug, basically, if you see recruit anytime before like the top four, you are definitely out. Like there's no question there.
You mean
Which is definitely a little
you
bit
mean the
annoying.
top
And
three?
especially if you are watching streams, it could be something that really takes away from your enjoyment of the stream.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So that's Battlegrounds. We may talk about a little bit more of it later. There's some like big HS hype going on right now. We'll speculate about it later. But let's first go back to the arena and talk about this. We did a deep fried meta last week. So I could kind of explain myself a little bit on how to justify extremely unpopular plays as the right play for certain considerations. Like sometimes you just want to chuck everything to get a little bit of one particular thing. Now we're gonna turn to a different topic. I'm gonna put my professor hat on, and this one we're gonna go a little more basic, because people like it's Hearthstone, right? This is not like math where everyone comes on. It's like you learn to add before you learn to subtract, then you learn to multiply. Like people learn different aspects of Hearthstone at different times. Like I went through the entirety of becoming really, really good at Hearthstone, like one of the top players, without knowing how to position my units. And it's arguable whether I know how to do it right now. But which again proves that it's not that important of a skill. But in any case, people just learn things in different ways and at different speeds. So maybe there's a bunch of our listeners who haven't learned this yet, whether because they're not as advanced or because they are advanced, but they're just like not paying attention to this. And it's about one of the most basic mechanics, probably the most basic mechanic in the entire game of Hearthstone, taunt. And I especially want to focus on the tempo aspect of taunt rather than the preventing you from going face aspect, which is hugely important. So everything we discuss now with deciding when to play taunt or not, also think about whether you want to prevent face damage, obviously. But it's like it's one of the first mechanics in Hearthstone. It has like one of the largest, like most glaring kind of like animation or like changes in the visual of it when it's on the board, and it just affects how everything works. I think without taunt, Hearthstone is not a strategic game. And in any meta where there are no taunts or very, very few and inconsequential taunts, the strategy suffers for it. And we're kind of in one of those metas now. There's very few taunts in the meta. And you see a lot of strategies developing differently because of it. Or I think a lot of players feel like a lack of strategy because a lot of the edges that you can get from taunts are no longer there. Especially like some of the larger, more annoying taunts. But I want to focus on the real basic part, which is, let's say you have Ascension, 3/5 taunt, 4 mana, you have it in your hand. The question is, what do you need to do to make Ascension a Yeti? Because Yeti is the comp for Ascension. They're about equally rated on basically every tier list. People, I think, used to think Yeti was a little bit better. Now I think they still think Yeti is a little bit better. We rate Yeti a little bit better for almost all the classes, but they're kind of comparable. Not gonna get a lot of pushback with people who are being like, "Oh, Yeti's so much better than Ascension." Yeah. So how do you make, like, at that point that Blizzard launched the game, they decided that one stat is worth the taunt. And they were kind of consistent with it. You see Iron for Grizzly with 3/3 with taunt, right? This is all before the new power level kicked in. Now you have stuff like Evil Heckler, which is basically a Lost Hall Strider with like a free taunt, so you're not giving up stats at all. The taunt is now viewed as like a little bit less than a stat. But back in the day, when the game was created, when everything was balanced, back in the fundamentals, taunt is worth about a stat, at least in the mid-range. When you get to larger taunts, they may be worth more than a stat. Smaller taunts, I think, are worth less than a stat, even from pretty early on. But they're worth about a stat overall. So what that means is that when you're playing the taunt, you're not getting its value unless you're protecting at least one stat. And you should really be protecting more than one stat, because the Yeti can be played at any time for basically the same kind of like value, whereas the Ascension has the same qualities of a Yeti, meaning it has a particular stat distribution which your opponents may take advantage of, or it may just be unusable for the board. But it's missing one of the stats that it's supposed to make up for with the taunt, so you got to make up for it. And I think that's a point. I'm going to put it, it seems like I'm saying a lot of really, really basic stuff, is because I am. But I feel like most players play without this kind of awareness when they're playing the taunts, where they're just like, oh, I have a 3 mana card, it is a taunt, and I want to play a 3 mana card right now because I have 5 mana and I have a 3 mana card and I want to use a hero power, so I'm going to play it. And then you don't get value out of that one stat. And sometimes that's fine. But you have to factor all that into your decision making, right? It's turn 5. Do you use your hero power and play a 3-drop, or do you play a 5-drop? You do some mental math about how much tempo, card advantage that you get, how good things are on the board. And when it's a close case, right, oftentimes you're just like, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. You're not thinking about it too deeply. But if you want to think about it too deeply, if you're actually breaking down the tempo, the card advantage, and everything, whenever you play a taunt, and you're not immediately, based on what is on the board, taking advantage of the fact that it is a taunt in some way, you're wasting a taunt. Not the entirety of the taunt, it's obviously still on the board forever, but you're wasting a lot of it. Because the thing with taunt, especially if your opponent has an empty board, is that now your opponents can play into your taunt. Like if you put out Ascension, and I put out a 5/5, I know now that you can't put a taunt out there that'll protect your Ascension. So I have an even bigger advantage because you put your taunt out first. That taunt, although usually a positive, is now kind of a positive in that I can't attack your other minions if the stat distribution is correct, but also kind of a negative in that you can't then taunt whatever's on, you can't then protect your taunt with another taunt. So I can feel pretty safe in playing my minion. in like a very fundamentals classic kind of base where there's not a lot of cards of ridiculous power levels, that's hugely important. And that will win you and lose you games. These days, it's probably not going to win you and lose you games, but it'll get you an extra half card or a card or so, and it adds up because let's face it, your opponent's playing like 2 to 3 taunts a game, and so are you, right? So if you can work out these advantages each turn, you do get something out of it. So that seems like a obvious point, but I wanted to make sure that people are aware of this because it's very important in this meta right now, taunts. Because taunts are not that good in this meta, and you're not going to get a lot of taunts. So each taunt that you have becomes extra valuable for all sorts of reasons. So next time you're thinking about just playing out a taunt because it's part of one of your 2 choices that you can do, know that that's the same as kind of like wasting an Elven Archer's initiative, like half of the value of that about. So, like, obviously, I'd rather play a taunt out on an empty board than play an Elven Archer out on an empty board. But I'd probably rather play an empty Elven Archer out than play 2 taunts on an empty board, right? When I don't need it and it's not doing anything for me. Something like that. Just, you don't think of it that way. You think like, oh, I'm wasting a battle cry. That's like a thing. You've wasted it. You don't think, oh, I'm wasting the taunt. Because the taunt sticks around. But the stuck around taunt is not anywhere near as good as that first turn you play the taunt. Cool. Deep fried meta? Deep and fried?
Cool. All right. That was, I don't know. It was definitely a little bit basic, but I understand what you're trying to get at. This is all the important stuff of how you should think about the game, right? This is all kind of stuff in that if you are wanting to get to the highest levels of the game, you got to break it down. You got to be like Neo looking at the Matrix, right?
And this is one of those things that I think a decent percentage of good arena players aren't thinking about like that. Because it's just not something they've been focused on. Because, you know, especially in the latest kinds of metas in this year, it hasn't been that important. But it's becoming a little more important now. I find myself thinking about it more in this meta than I have in the metas earlier in the year. Think of it as a battle cry because you're screwing your opponents over, and it builds on itself, right? Like if you're a good player, you make good trades on the board, and if you make good trades on your board, one of the ways to do it is to protect it with a taunt. So you'll find yourself in more and more positions to be able to use a taunt well than if you were a bad player, like not setting up the board as well. So it has like a positive loop effect, like a spiraling upwards, like positive effect, right? Rather than a downward spiral, like where it's just better for bad players, like I don't know, just basic RNG, right? So it's a skill that builds upon itself and gets more and more important the higher you go, even.
Okay, cool.
All right.
What are we talking about next?
That's deep fried meta. Next, let's talk about what's happening. Like Blizzard apparently did something and invited a bunch of people. We were not invited, of course.
The Hearthstone Summit 2020,
also known as the first Hearthstone Summit, I think.
I think there was one.
Maybe there was one before, but it wasn't. It's not like an every year thing. And anyway, the people are under NDAs. The streamers, the pro players who went are all under NDAs. They haven't said anything. No one's broken the NDA, but they're almost all very, very excited about what's happening in 2020. So Blizzard apparently showed a bunch of stuff that's coming out in 2020 for Hearthstone. And it's going to be more than just we're going to release more expansions. Because if you're just going to release more expansions at this point in Hearthstone's life cycle, the streamers and the pro players are not going to be that excited. Something, probably multiple things, really big is going to happen. And they're not things that we already know about or has been hinted about, or else it wouldn't be so exciting.
Yeah. So just to correct you for a second, I mean, there have been multiple ones throughout the years.
Really?
Like many. Yeah.
They're called Hearthstone Summits. I've just never heard of this before.
Yeah. I don't know how you haven't heard of them. I have heard of many of them.
Really? I haven't heard of any of them until this one.
No, they've consistently done this.
Okay. Well,
They've
then, so
invited.
wait. So what did people listen to last year? There's never any hype around it.
No, there's never any real hype around it, but it happens. I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say. It's happened before.
Okay. So it's happened. So there's never any really hype about it until this one, but they've
I think
always been
what might have
happening.
happened is they might not have invited the number of people that they have
I see.
this year. I
Okay.
don't know, right? Like I've never been invited, and I don't exactly know. But I do know that in previous years, even if they didn't want to call it a summit, I have no idea what it was, but they have consistently brought people in before the year has really gotten started
To talk about
to
the entire year's, like the rest of
talk
the year
about
stuff.
what's next for Hearthstone.
Okay.
Not just like here's what's coming up for this year, like here is the future of Hearthstone, period.
Okay. Okay. I
So
know they
yeah.
bring people in now and then, like just to run stuff by
Mhm.
them, but I didn't know that there was like a summit and that it was like annual. But okay, so less exciting, but this year seems to be bigger. And this is the only year that I've seen where people actually came back and were very excited and like, were basically like, hey guys, like, because they're putting their reputations on the line too for saying this. They've been around the block for, 6, 7, 8 years with this Hearthstone game. So for them to be excited, and they're not coming back with from every one of these summits being excited, or at least not like super excited. So things are happening.
Yeah, we don't know, and they have said that we don't have to wait for too long to be able to find out. And that's also smart as well. You don't want to basically just build up this momentum and then have people wait like 4 or 5 months and just forget about everything. So people seem to be very optimistic. Froden even went to say as far as it sort of locks in Hearthstone's next 10 years. Um, I don't exactly know what that means, but I think the excitement is something that, like, what you can conclude is that, they do happen to have a plan for Hearthstone, period. Also, an arena streamer was invited. Dreads was invited from the arena community as well. I don't know what you can exactly take away from that because um, they could also just see him as being part of the Hearthstone community.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he literally only plays the arena.
He's like
So
one of the only arena players who like touched some BG for a while and then like just went back and was like, yeah, I'm just gonna play arena.
yeah. So Dreads is one of those people that only plays arena. Did that calculate into their decisions as like, oh, it'd be nice to have this arena streamer come and to see what's coming up next for the arena? I don't know. It could also just be one of those, a rising tide, like rising tide, sort of like moves all the ships up,
I'm
whatever.
telling you, it's gonna be something that's gonna hit in the summer, towards the end of the summer, and it's gonna totally change arena. Like we may not have an arena anymore. I would not be surprised if they scrap the whole arena.
Who knows, man? Who knows? But we should see fairly soon. Blizzard has been a little bit quiet recently. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard much from them, so a big announcement is not unexpected, and we would definitely expect them, coming into the new year to get us hyped for this entire year, and then show us what's ahead, so that we can get excited about opening up our wallets and spending money.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, I did buy, because of Battlegrounds, I did buy like Hearthstone stuff for like the first time in
Oh, would
in
you
many
buy?
years. Well, just the pre-release for Descent of Dragons, and then I also
Oh,
bought Galakrond's Awakening. So I bought two Hearthstone things, which are probably my first two purchases in the last 2 years, Hearthstone related. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of working on me. The latest marketing efforts and tying BGs into it. But what do you think is the future for? Let's break this down. So we're not going to talk about constructed because we don't talk about constructed. Assuming that it's not going to be purely constructed focused, which at this point there's also battlegrounds, there's also arena, kinda, there's also brawl, which we are also not going to talk about. But and there's also very likely, I think, the potential for a totally different like game mode, right? Like modes right now has just like arena and battlegrounds in it. Could be something extra to it. Maybe they're totally overhauling Arena because it's such a failure. Like, who knows, right? But it's safe to say that there's a lot of pieces to this. So let's take it step by step. First, what do you think may be in store for the Arena? If there is something in store, or do you think nothing really is in store for the Arena?
Oh,
Just
man.
baseless speculation here. I'm going to
Baseless
completely
speculation.
baseless.
That's what
We
this
have
podcast
no
is
inside
about
knowledge.
now.
We're not bound by NDAs, so we can say whatever we want because we know nothing.
Here's what I think will happen, or here's what I hope will happen, or some combination of that, or what? What is this?
Whatever. Well, okay. Talk about what you think will actually happen and what you want will happen.
What I think will happen is not much of anything. What I hope will happen is that the people in charge will see how successful limited formats have been for literally every other card game that has been successful. And kind of just go from there. Like, okay, look at the product that we have right now and see, okay, well, what is missing right now? Why don't people play it more? And then ask themselves the hard questions like, okay, well, do we want to further this specifically, or do we want to change it up a little bit fundamentally? Like they've tried some like kind of fundamental changes previously with the buckets and how you draft. I think that if you want to get people interested in a limited format in which you're still drafting, you might have to you can't just slap like a new coat of paint on it. You're really going to have to do something a little bit more extreme. Like, let us, one of the ideas that people have had is like, let us overdraft and then cut down the deck a little bit, introduce tournament mode as well, inject some money into it such that, maybe you have some tournaments here or there. The love for any sort of limited format is obviously there. And you can even call Battlegrounds a limited format. That's limited. Like, you don't get to construct your deck. So it's obviously there. And what I hope happens is that they look at Arena and they say, this is we want to further this sort of limited format. And we want to just sort of not just slap a new coat of paint on it. We want to do something more. And I hope they go in that direction. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. I think that is going to happen. So
right.
I think that's where we differ. I'm totally with you. I'm with you every step of the way on everything you just said, except that I'm optimistic that it is going to happen, whether they call it Arena or not.
Because we're now talking about something like, this is why I keep using the term limited format instead of Arena, right? Yeah. Because it's what I'm envisioning is going to be perhaps not just what we've been seeing, right? It's probably going to be a little bit different and got some of what we love about the Arena, but some things that are very different, and necessarily so, because what we currently have just isn't working.
Yeah. And it's just better like PR, right? Don't say like, we updated the Arena, which has all these cool stuff now. I'll say like, we have shut down the Arena and made something so much better for you.
It's a new product.
It's going to be called Coliseum. Like whatever.
Yeah.
And then we would all play Coliseum and we'd be like, this is basically Arena, except you are offered 3 cards for 33 picks instead of 30. And you get to build a deck afterward. But it's still Arena. But they'll slap a new coat of paint on it, and call it something else, and maybe it'll drive more players in, right? Maybe it'll drive more players, like 2 or 3 fundamental changes that are not like super big, but like definitely will change how Arena looks inside the games, right, and in the drafting process.
Oh yeah, definitely. Do that, and at the same time, say we're putting out leaderboards, and we are going to sponsor like a tournament, right? For something like this, and I think that's perfect. But that is what is necessary. They can't just put out live leaderboards for the current version of Arena that we have.
Yep.
That's not enough to get people really back in. Like, is that going to be enough to get someone like Collins back in? No. Is that going to be enough to get someone like Shady Bunny or Sun Glitter's back? No, I don't think it is. But you release, I'm going to take your name for it, like Coliseum mode, right? Is that enough to get those people back in? Maybe / probably.
They'll at least come back to check it out.
Yeah, exactly. They will at least come back to check it out. Meanwhile, if you just put a band-aid on it and say, well, here's kind of what you guys had, but a shinier version of the leaderboards. And also we're going to do rotations a little bit more often, microadjust a little bit more often. That's not going to be enough. You're going to keep on losing people, and you're going to consistently have this product that, I don't know however much money it makes you, but is always a wasted opportunity.
Yep. Totally agree. Okay, so moving on from the arena / Coliseum mode that is upcoming. It would be great, by the way, if they're actually going to call it Coliseum mode. Coliseum mode, by the way, it's also a terrible name. Like, I feel like Blizzard would do way better than my name that I came up with last second.
I hope so, man.
But if it's actually called Coliseum mode, I would laugh my
Someone's getting paid to come up with the name, so
Mhm.
I hope they do a better job than what you just did.
Coliseum mode is so bad. Okay, let's talk about something that we know is going to come out and we know exists and we don't know when or how, but Battlegrounds is going to come out. Like, actually come out. Not this, like, we get to all play for free and earn no rewards kind of come out. But, like, a real thing. So, I remember when Battlegrounds first came out, we were like, it's probably going to be released in 3 months. Why? Because they want to start making money from it at some point, right? And like integrating it into the economy of the game instead of just having it hang out. Since then, they've probably been about 4 times slower at testing things than I thought they were going to be, which is not surprising. But it means they haven't gotten that much testing in. On the other hand, it is in a decent state right now in terms of the variety and stuff. But they haven't tested that much stuff. And what they really haven't done is they haven't like added a whole bunch of like basically they haven't tried adding an expansion in and seeing if they can maintain balance. Because it's all well and good to have a balanced core set of these cards that are generally in, but going forward, are you going to really be able to keep Battlegrounds engagement by like adding a card in and taking a card out, swapping in a hero, swapping out another hero, like doing that every few weeks? Like, is that really going to be able to keep all the engagement up? Or because Hearthstone works on an expansion release system, do you actually like with each expansion release also release like 1 or 2 Battleground cards? And if you're going to do that, do you have a way to ensure that it's actually like somewhat balanced and you don't get the demon meta again, or a few metas back, the Murloc meta? Like, I don't know. They haven't tested that a lot, and so we don't know the timeline for it, and we don't know. They kept talking about like putting dragons into Battlegrounds, right? And like that's not like, is that happening next?
It's going to happen at some point. I mean, a lot of that is speculation driven by the community. So
I think someone said they were considering it, right? Or like
yeah,
this was like
yeah,
back in like November too.
Sure, yeah. It's definitely something that I think will happen eventually. But this, any notion that it's going to happen anytime soon is that is sort of community driven.
Mm-hmm.
Blizzard has never been like, "Yep, it's right around the corner on Dragons." Haha. That's never been the case. So yeah, I think with Battlegrounds, look, the game is in a good place right now. I think what they have is a very unlike the arena, in which the product right now is a little bit broken and old. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's very old, and it's like a little broken.
Yeah, exactly. So that is unfortunately like untenably broken. With Battlegrounds, they have a good product. It's just about what they want to do with it, because enough people play it such that you can try to you can go in some sort of competitive direction. You can also just make it one of those modes in which you want it to be okay. Like, I want Hearthstone to be something in which people get together with their friends and play it, and then just get them really hooked, right? So what we still haven't had is the ability for you to get together with a group of friends and really play Hearthstone. That has never been a thing, right? And that's actually very, very different than um, its progenitor, Magic, tries to do. Like Magic really tried, like it built off the fact that you can get together with a group of friends and play Magic, right?
Well,
Hearthstone
you
has
had to get a group of friends to
you
play
had to
Magic.
get a group of
Because if
friends,
you were
right?
like me and you just played a deck against yourself, I mean, it was still pretty fun back in the day to sit in a room and play a Magic deck against myself to see how the decks would match up and like to tweak things. But I
Right.
think I would have had more fun if I had more friends who also played Magic.
So
And by that I mean if I had more friends at all.
if you just have more friends,
Hmm.
exactly.
That would up the chance that some of them would play Magic.
Very true.
But I think Hearthstone
But
anticipated that many of its players would not like have friends. And I mean, they have access to your friends list. They know the stats. It just doesn't seem like it's a very high priority for them to have you be able to play exclusively with friends.
but
Like it feels like
so
they're
one thing
seeing you
that's
and saying you don't have that many friends, and we're gonna make you not feel bad for not having friends by not putting features in that would make you force you to have friends.
so with Hearthstone, it's always been a 1v1 game. It's never been a group game. And that's
Hmm.
something in which they can try to, fill in that gap with Battlegrounds. What they can try to do, like they've always had the option of doing that just by implementing a tournament mode in the main game,
Hmm.
right? They didn't want to do that for some reason. That's fine. But with BGs, you have instant tournament mode without the tournament mode, right? It's not an extra tournament mode, it's just the base game. 8 players necessarily join in the game by itself. So with BGs, you naturally sort of feed people's desire for a tournament mode without actually coming out with tournament mode. It gives you the ability to have people, group up and play. So I think one of the things that they are going to do to kind of patch in that gap in the Hearthstone portfolio is to just give people the ability to create their own BG lobbies. Because I think that the product itself right now is very good, and all you have to do, it's with BGs, it's more about polish and presentation and less about the actual core game. And with the core game, they can add some cards here or there. I don't even think that's important. Like the product right now is still new enough, it's still shiny enough that it sort of stands on its own. If you just introduce one or two heroes every now and again, that's great. But by injecting that element of being able to group up, being able to play with your friends, I think that actually just makes Hearthstone so much more comprehensive. It makes the game much, much more attractive. And I think it'll hook a lot more people in. So I think that's hopefully what they are going to do. And it effectively gives them that tournament mode kind of, like that. It fills in that desire for people, and they don't have to actually make a tournament mode.
Okay. Counterpoint, and I think I'm really big on this idea that people who play Hearthstone generally don't have friends. And to whatever extent that they did have friends before, they have less of them because they played so much Hearthstone. And to whatever extent the friends that they did have used to play Hearthstone, the vast majority of them no longer play Hearthstone. And I think Blizzard is smart, recognizes that, and will not allow us to do anything with friends so that we would feel less bad about ourselves and less isolated from the fact that, let's say we have like 4 friends and like 2 of them used to play Hearthstone and now none of them play Hearthstone and that it's a dying game. So I think, or I'm hoping, that Blizzard's going to take it in a totally different direction than allowing us to play this game with each other and instead just make the game better so that people would actually want to play with each other more. And once you drive that demand up, because I don't think we're there. You're like, I think Battlegrounds is a great product and everyone's playing. I'm like, I'm monitoring the Reddit activity, I'm monitoring like, the viewership numbers on Twitch. Like, it's good. It's a good product, but I don't think it's getting Blizzard to where they want Hearthstone. Like, I don't think Team 5 is looking at all these numbers and going, we're doing great. I think they're looking at these and going, okay, We're not quite there yet. And adding all these social features and these interconnectivity, it takes it takes a pretty big undertaking from the tech side. So I think if they're going to do that, they're going to have something before that that's even more addictive and more not timeless, but more like frequently updated. Because we've seen what Hearthstone does, right? They just keep putting out new expansions. That's how they keep the interest. It's their entire business model. And right now, what Battlegrounds does not do is have any way of sustaining its interest past this initial period. So I feel like that's the piece that's going to come in before the social features. And maybe like they come in like similar, but I feel like they need something to make it that it's not just Battlegrounds Classic. Because I don't play that much Battlegrounds. I like almost all the Battlegrounds I play, except in the very beginning, are on stream. And I like the game. I really like the game. You see, whenever Arena gets a little stale or it's towards the end of a meta, I'm playing Battlegrounds. But I'm not like in a meta after I play, I don't know, maybe like at most 30 runs. At absolute peak 30 runs. I'm very done with it. Like at that point. Doesn't matter which heroes I'm using. It doesn't matter, like, I've already explored all the like different comps and whatever things like that. Like at that point, yes, it is limited format, but it feels much more like constructed based on what hero you pick than it feels like Arena. Which, like, you may look at Arena and say, hey, you're getting like similar types of decks each time when you pick, let's say we're doing Druid today. When you play Druid, like, yes, but there's like so many like nuances in the kind of deck that you get, especially if the drafting system is robust. I think the drafting system can be more robust just by very simply adding one more expansion set into the rotation rather than having the current number of sets, because since the current number of sets was set, there has been 3 more expansions that have come out, right? So anyway, my point basically is I'm waiting for dragons or whatever the equivalent of the next like big Battlegrounds changes. They tried to add the demons thing in by doing a small replacement. But honestly, I'm going to ask you this question because you play more Battlegrounds than me. Do you think Battlegrounds will be a successful product that keeps interest for 2 years if every 2 months they add 2 to 3 new minions, replacing the 2 to 3 like older classic minions, and also add 2 to 3 new heroes, replacing 2 to 3 old heroes?
Without adding any additional functionality, like I was talking about?
Yeah, without adding any additional functionality, and or with
No.
adding additional functionality. Like,
Well,
let's
what
say
kind of?
you can now have there's a tournament mode for all of Hearthstone, whether it's Arena or Battlegrounds or Constructed.
Oh, then yeah. I
You,
think that like if you introduce custom lobbies and tournament modes,
mm-hmm.
I think that actually improves everyone's experience so much that yes, I think so.
Really? You think just
Yeah.
adding custom lobbies will improve the
Yep.
lifespan of Hearthstone with minimal like upkeep of cards?
Oh yeah. It okay. Because here's the thing: you want to give people enough tools in order to actually play the game their own way, right? Right now,
Mm-hmm.
Hearthstone, for how social they want to make it, and they want to make it very social because I mean, look at the animated movies that Blizzard makes about Hearthstone. It's about like good sport, and it's about enjoying the game in a tavern with other people. It's an extraordinarily isolated experience. It's like a very very isolated experience. And in terms of other games, if you just compare it to other games, right? I think that you are wasting incredible interest from fans and from communities because you can't really build rivalries. You can't really have these personalities going up against each other. And it's because of number one, lack of tournaments or tournament structures that aren't really incentivizing people like they would rather stream than do that. But the biggest thing is like if you are a streamer, a big streamer, like let's say you are a streamer like Dog and you're a streamer like Kibler, and even if they wanted to somehow create content of them facing each other,
They could do that in Constructed.
they could do that, but they would just pick decks and then face each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing in the deck that not in the deck. There's nothing in the game that organically gives them that ability unless they're really just facing each other and not doing anything. What they can do if Blizzard gave them more tools, right? And Blizzard gives people tools in other games like custom modes, like uh, by building custom games, by being able to build tournaments, right? Sometimes, and now your top streamers can be facing each other. It creates storylines. It gives these very creative people the ability to use their creativity, not just in the game, but for how to play the game with other people as well. So that's what really they're missing right now. Like I feel like Blizzard with Hearthstone, they have made
So what are you
such
saying?
a
Are you saying like you want like custom lobbies with like banned cards or like
yeah. Just give these extraordinarily smart, creative people tools for them to show off their creativity in other ways of like in ways other than just like, oh well, Kaliseth is good, I'm gonna put Kaliseth in. Oh, I'm gonna run 2 copies of this card instead of 1 copy. Stuff like that. Like that's where all the creativity goes right now. But with a lot of other games, the developers give them tools to express their creativity outside of just the 4 corners of the game itself. So that's what I think needs to happen with Hearthstone. And I think that by introducing tools starting with custom lobbies, tournament modes, I think you'll get that because we have a community full of really, really freaking smart people and really creative people. And a lot of that is just untapped potential right now.
but I mean that makes sense. No, I was gonna say something, but I'm under an NDA of something else. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like you could put all the social features and all the customization into a game like Battlegrounds, but unless you're looking at it in like let's say StarCraft, where people are making like custom maps and custom rule sets, and they go like that deep into the customization, if you just allow people to get in and like make tournaments, I mean, it'll be a very nice feature, and it'll bring the community more together, and it'll help them keep the community that they have, like so that it's not because they lost so much of the community over the past like 2 years. Um, that if they had the stuff that you were talking about in place like 2 years ago, they wouldn't have lost it. I don't know if they gained it, but they wouldn't have lost it. So it may like stop the bleeding, but I don't think it's like I find it difficult to think of that as the turning point in a game. Like think about a game, any game that did not have tournament mode or like customization, then got customizations and became like big again. Like there's maybe 1 or 2 examples of this in history, and it's not in.
Well, no, you just
like,
never know with this kind of stuff. When you give people tools, stuff that you don't anticipate happening happens. Like you give people tools in Warcraft 3, what happens, Dota is born. You give
yes.
people tools in Dota, what happens, Auto Chess is born. Like, I would not have been able to anticipate any of this stuff, Like, maybe
Yeah, but
something
that's not.
spawns from it, maybe something doesn't. But if you give people tools, there is always the opportunity for something to really take off.
It's not the same when you're talking about a strategy game, though. Like, you got to give them a lot of tools for a strategy game. Like, you got to make it go deeper, right? Like, think about what tools Warcraft 3 have. Like, what you're talking about is if they can change the stats on the card, if they can make custom cards, and if they can, like, do things like that. Possibly, like, make custom, like, mana gaining rules or, like, what possibly other rules, right? Like, because that's what Warcraft 3 editor has. That's what StarCraft editor has. That's what
Okay,
like
sure.
Overwatch
All
editor
right.
has.
Let me give you a good example. Commander in MTG.
Yeah.
Okay, like that's a good example then, right?
Of what? There's no way to do that in Hearthstone.
No, not right now. Not right now.
There's no way to make a tool that'll let you do Commander. Unless it's something that Blizzard created, not these smart creative people
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Kibler that you're talking about, but that Team 5 created and says, now
I
there's a
mean,
commander
now we're
mode.
talking about like all of these tools, but like if you want to just talk about within the confines of a card game, right?
Yeah.
There's Commander. There's what other formats does MTG have? Like
Oh, no,
Cube,
I'm not saying you can't
right?
invent that, but you can't invent
Yeah.
that through a tool. You can invent that, like, as a human being. Like, people are very creative. You can do whatever you want.
Hmm.
But like, think about how that would work and from what you're talking about. So they update HS in a way in which you didn't have heroes before, and now all of a sudden you can change a card into a hero. That's what commander mode is.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can't do that. That's not like engineeringly feasible. That's not feasible from an engineering perspective to give people the tools to do that. Like that's not a thing.
Look,
That
I mean, I
happened
don't
in
know.
MTG. Well, no, it's not. That's like that can happen in MTG because MTG was a physical card game, and you could do whatever rules you want that your mind can think of, as long as everyone agrees to it in the real world. But if you were to have to program that in, you'd either have to give everybody like very deep customization programming tools, or you would have to create like a limited set of things that they can tweak, like and it
Sure.
could be as limited or as not limited. So if you're looking at, for example,
Sure.
within
I mean, you're
Blizzard, when
basically
new
saying they
game
can't
mode,
create commander mode, and I'm like, okay.
yeah,
Commander
because
is an example of like so a still card game, right? Of a card game quote mode
mm-hmm.
that was created from the base game and is now quite popular. I think another alternate card mode or like card game that's using the base Hearthstone cards, using the skeleton that they created can come from Hearthstone as well. So I agree. Like it is going to be really hard for them to create Commander, but if we're talking about card game, because one of your original arguments was like, well, with Warcraft 3 editor, you could create that. It's much harder to create it with something like
like you can
Hearthstone,
create
right? And I agree
custom
with that.
cards. Like if they
But
allowed
you
that,
can
I think there's
you can create a Commander-esque tangential card game from a base card game. I agree that if you're thinking of the tools that are needed to make Commander in Hearthstone, that is difficult. But we have seen tangential card games come from a card game itself, right?
yeah, but that's not
Yeah,
what we're talking about here. We're talking about what Hearthstone can do, or what they have plans of maybe doing in 2020 that everyone's so excited about, or that we
sure.
want
I mean,
them
we're
to
just
do.
talking about ability right now. I
Yeah,
obviously
like, I don't think they
anticipate
have
this
that
happening.
ability. Like I don't think they can go that deep in customization. Like definitely not for something like Commander mode. The most they can do is something like Pauper mode, or like allow you to like set rules, right? Set ban lists, allow you to set
Yeah.
like things like that. So you can create custom rule sets, but you can't create a whole new game unless the customization goes deep. Which, to be fair, Blizzard allows in all of their games.
Literally
Like literally every game except Hearthstone. So I'm not saying that that's also out of the option, but that would be crazy if that's what happened. If they just release like a Hearthstone editor out into the world where you can just make all of your cards, maybe have like placeholder pictures or like something, and then like create custom lobbies and have people play on that. Like that would create a very different game. I don't know how excited I would be about that because I'm not going to be the one there either creating the next auto chess or like I don't know, Defense of the Ancients or whatever. And I'm probably like I'll play it, but someone has to create it. It has to go big, and it's still a card game, and there are different rules. I don't know. I feel like it's happened enough times in history for it to potentially be
Right.
a thing, but when it comes
Whatever
to
it is, we just can't imagine it right now. Because if we could imagine it, it would like be there, right?
I think for card games and strategy games in general, the rule set customization has to be like not just your basic amount of rule customizations. It has to be fundamentally game changing because the whole purpose, like if you imagine, like how did MTG get started? MTG started with a base set of rules about how things interacted, and then everything you print on a card is something that will break a rule. That's MTG, and that's Hearthstone, and that's every game that's evolved since then under this path that we're on. So the whole point of the game, the only like discerning characteristic of any non-basic card is the ability for it to break a rule in the game. It's exceedingly difficult to put an editor into the hands of players that allows them to break the rules of the game in creative ways that does not have just a ridiculous amount of bugs in it. Like, you can allow them to use existing mechanics. You can allow them to, to ban cards or certain types of cards. You can allow them to change numbers around. But those things by themselves has never created a new game mode that is like significantly different than the core game mode. Like Pauper is what I'm thinking of, because that's like as close to creativity as you're going to get in this kind of like editor system. Because strategy games, especially strategy games based upon breaking your own rules, which is what MTG is, they're notoriously difficult. Like, the creativity lies in the rule breaking. So to get the creativity out of the box and to package it into something everything else is played, you have to be able to break the scripted rules in the game. And by definition, an editor doesn't let you do that. Like, a user-friendly editor doesn't let you do that. They tell you what the rules of the general world are and then force you to live in them. So, like, I don't know. I think you're coming up with a lot of examples that involve fundamental changes that can't be done in Hearthstone, in like a Hearthstone editor. Like, I think that's why like MTG can't, all the new game modes that you're talking about in MTG, like, they don't exist without physical cards. Like, if it was just MTGO and they had a really fancy editor, they still don't exist.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm just saying, like, this comes back to us. I think we're trying to answer different questions. I'm like, this is what we need, and you're saying this isn't that easy to do.
I'm saying there's no way Blizzard's going to do it or has done it. I'm not saying it's not easy. I'm saying it's not possible. It's like it's like it like fundamentally negates itself, is what I'm saying. Like, it's not possible to exist in a way that is as expansive in terms of the editing powers as you would need in order to do the things that Warcraft has been able to do, that Overwatch has been able to do, StarCraft, right? Like, you're in a different world when you're talking about a turn-based strategy game. You could create, like, more interesting draft rules and stuff. So I do think there is some room to move in there, but you're not going to make a whole new game. Like imagine if they let you set offering odds in the arena and the number of cards that are offered, right? And then someone comes up with like a community-based like standard for what a draft in Hearthstone would actually be like. Like, that could be possible. Right? In the same way, if people got together and constructed and were like, these two cards are overpowered, we're banning them everywhere. We created our ban list, and then everyone starts accepting that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that's possible, like Pauper mode. Not like Commander, not like creating like Defense of the Ancients from Warcraft. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the outlook for 2020 and what Merps wants to see happen in Hearthstone and what I want to see happen in Hearthstone. And we're in very different directions of what we'd like to see happen with the game. Whether either of this happens or none of this happens, they do something totally different, we have no idea. That's where we're able to speculate about it, because we are not under an NDA, because we don't know any more than you do. So yeah. Is there a question from the GOAT?
No, you had a question, right?
I had a question myself. I really just want to like talk about this because I put a lot of time in it. Because I wanted to do it for myself. So I've been playing Three Houses in Fire Emblem. I like kind of just got around to playing it starting a few weeks ago. And like I normally do, I created a tier list of all the characters based off of an algorithm. Based off of how the stats interact. Fire Emblem's a very easy game. The mechanics are also very simple. They're like complicated, but they're not deep. They're like a very shallow layer, and they just kept layering more and more things onto it. But ultimately, there's not that much strategy, and it's not like a terribly deep game. Outside of positioning, positioning is actually very important in the game. But like the actual stats don't deal with it. So I didn't get too deep into programming all the like abilities and whatever in. So this is obviously not a finished tier list, so it doesn't account for a lot of stuff, but it does account for things that people seem to care a lot about. And I think they care about it more than they should, and that's growth rates and stats overall. So I combine the starting stats with all the growth rates throughout the course of the game, and I have a tier list of just based on stats who is going to ultimately get you the most useful stats, and I adjusted the stats based on how useful they would be given the other stats that the character would have. So, for example, strength would be like useful for some characters, magic would be useful for other characters, and they would be useful in different degrees for different characters depending on how much strength or magic the character had. So, if you had a very high strength and a very low magic, your magic is nearly worthless because you're never going to do anything with it. If you had more even strength or magic, they would both be kind of useful, but your primary stat will still be significantly more useful than your less primary stat. And, I have a whole curve for that stuff. So it's stuff like that, right? I see a lot of tier lists online that just like add up all the numbers, and that's clearly wrong because all the stats are not worth the same. That's like if I created a tier list in Hearthstone and I just added attack plus defense and subtracted out mana. Like that's what people are effectively doing with their like statistical tier, like stat-based tier lists of this game. Anyway, I did it all. I'm pretty comfortable with the results. And the number one non house leader / your protagonist hero in terms of pure stats is one of my favorite characters in the game, Linhardt. And I bet nobody would have come up with that. And I'm pretty confident that that's right. He may be lacking in some other areas, like I don't know, he's not even lacking in that many other areas, but like his offensive abilities are a little limited, so I think people are not as keen to call him like OP or anything like that. But pound for pound stat wise, he is number one with a lot of useful stats. It just ends up making him very solid. Linhardt's a guy, he has the worst haircut in the game. He his entire personality is that he wants to take a nap. They just built an entire character around his desire to not fight. This is the fighting game. His desire to not fight, but not for any like higher purpose of like peace or philosophy or whatever. He's like a nerdy guy who just like doesn't like violence and wants to nap. That's it. I don't think I'm missing any other element of this character from what I've seen.
Okay, so follow-up question. You have unveiled this thing. Is he known as a bad character?
I think he's known as an okay character. I don't think he's known as like a terrible character. I haven't like jumped in and all of a sudden been like, how you guys all say that Banshee's terrible is actually like the best neutral card in the game. But I think he's something that like people are like, in the middle on. Like he's a usable hero, but nowhere near like if you're asking like best hero, best character in terms of like stats, no one would say him. He would not make anyone's like top 5 or even top 10 list, I think. Linhardt is top 10 used. Okay, maybe top 10 list, not top 5 list. And yes, I realize for those who actually know the game, I do share many characteristics with Linhardt around the wanting to nap part and generally not wanting to participate in things and being lazy. Okay, just wanted to bring that out there. Number 2 is Hubert. Like the system penalizes stuff like lists is usually number 1 in most people's lists, but that has a lot to do with her good spell list, which this is not taking into account. This is purely statistical, and her stat growth is grossly, and I mean grossly, overrated. Like after you look at all the other things, like she has weaknesses in her like stat growth, and I think they come into more like when you play on maddening difficulty, it becomes a little more apparent what her weaknesses are that she could just kind of paper over in lower difficulties. I mean, she's still she's still really good. She has a really good spell list, but stat wise, she's not like that growth is not compensating sufficiently for her low starting, and everybody thinks it's like, oh, it's so good. I'm reading chat. Cass says Dorothea and Petra are mine. They're OP. They both do not do particularly well stat wise. Dorothea has a good spell list. Petra's one of my favorite characters, but she's not. Her stats are like a little too like evenish. They're not like good for min maxing. But they're also there's other things to account for, right? It's actually hard to make this list if you want to make an actual tier list, not just a stat-based tier list, because they also have overpowered classes that are like legitimately overpowered compared to the other classes, and those classes are sometimes like gender locked. So like all male characters are just like worse because they can't get access to these classes that only women can get access to. It's very sexist of a game in many ways, but I think both sexes that they programmed into the game, they don't have a transgender person as far as I know, or anything more fancy than that. But both are inconvenienced in different ways. Okay, that's my long rant, completely irrelevant about Fire Emblem. You can tweet at me if you want more information on how I'm evaluating these stat stuff. I do this. I've spent like probably 10, maybe 20 hours like figuring all of this out instead of playing the game. And I figured this out for like my runs for all the houses. Now I just have to go and like actually play the game, which is it's annoying playing the actual game. Theory crafting is just so much more fun. All right. Anything you've been doing? Anything when I've been spending my 10, 20 hours on figuring out Fire Emblem in a kind of useless statistical way, but that makes me happy.
Nope. We're just gonna end it right here.
All right.
Just do it. End it.
Okay. Hopefully, we will have a new patch next week to talk about. But if we don't, we'll still be here and we'll talk about more about arena fundamentals and other stuff. Until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. See you guys.